can achieve. And that's not just about race, but also that's relating to our achievement academically, our achievement socially, and our achievement social and emotionally. This resolution is not talking about doing anything without the guidance of your community members. What it is saying is that you're going to set it as a priority. Just like in COVID right now, we're in a situation where we need to make changes. We're in a situation where our school district has to be relevant to the needs and the concerns and the acute necessities that our families need right now to maneuver within this unprecedented time. I would recommend and I would submit to the board that right now we are in a time in our nation's history where we are facing right in front of us the very open truth of our nation's founding on white supremacy, okay? That's uncomfortable. Even sitting in this room today, when we said the word race, there was unsettledness in the room, and that's okay. But what I'm submitting to the board is that we don't have all the answers, but we're going to be committed to help our students and to help our families know how to talk about these hard topics. It's not easy. It's not easy for me growing up in New Hampshire and for having children ask if they could touch my hair because they've never seen a brown person before. But when we're adults, those same people are going to be making decisions about who's going to have a job and who's not. It's not easy to make assumptions that someone is capable or incapable of one thing or another based on the color of their skin. But those are the implicit biases that we have. So the resolutions that we're talking about right now is not about setting an agenda. It's about giving our families the tools that we need in order to have thoughtful conversations one way or the other regarding race, equity, and inclusion, because our kids are going to be in your seats making these very important decisions. And we want to set that example for the state on how to do it right. So I thank you to the board, I thank you to our leadership for taking a conscientious look at this very difficult topic, but I would also submit that this is not the time to wait. Our kids are asking questions, and I would love to have your guidance on how I can have those conversations during this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public input?
Joe Garuba, 28 Winchester Drive. Before I cover some of my prepared statements, I just made some notes based on the presentation, so I had some questions. I think Andy mentioned that the current resolution that we're discussing was produced by a group and passed on to you, but you didn't say what group passed that on. Do you know who that was?
It was community members. They're all people that have either kids in our schools, have had kids go through our schools. So these are, just moms and dads who were concerned.
Okay. The other thing that came to mind is there is a document that was passed on from the Anti-Defamation League about potentially what the implications of their study or their changes would be, but that wasn't in the packet that was distributed to us?
No, what came from the Anti-Defamation League, I reached out to them and asked them what they had for programming to assist schools moving forward on inclusion and tolerance. So they sent me a large document that I've been reviewing.
Can you make that available to?
Sure, I'm not sure I'm going to go with it, so I think ultimately what I typically do is if I'm going to make a recommendation to the board, I'll put that proposal into the board's packet, but I have no problem making
So the larger scope of things would be possible outcomes of adopting this policy, so knowing what could possibly come out of that report would probably be important.
Okay.
The other thing that you mentioned was that someone else provided there was a third thing, I wrote it down as a third thing. Maybe I misunderstood it. Was there a third document or proposal that you got from somebody that you reached out to?
Yes. When I reached out to the Anti-Defamation League, I reached out to a gentleman, I don't want to say his name wrong, but I'll apologize in advance. It's Dio Muano, I think is how it's pronounced. He spoke at the New Hampshire Superintendent's Conference this year on diversity and inclusion. Having heard him speak, I reached out to him and said, look, we're at the beginning stages of looking for resources for Hollis and Brookline. Can you send me a proposal of what your consulting firm does and how you approach this matter?
Okay, so then there's the ADL proposal, and then there's the proposal from this, what's his consulting firm's name?
I just know his name. Off the top of my head, Joe, I don't know his.
You can track it down, I guess, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. So I'm not gonna go into the details in this at this point. I'll just go through some of my other thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, we're in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime event that's disrupted our own lives and our children's lives. Our children have been losing out on the education that's critical to their future. The present crisis we find ourselves in demands that we focus as a district on providing the education that our children need. Our school board and administrators worked hard to meet the tough challenge last year, and I appreciate your efforts. And I thank you for your dedication. I was surprised to find the newly proposed non-discrimination policy included in the material for tonight's meeting. Revising the non-discrimination policy cannot be a priority until we are providing quality education for our children. The school's policies should be a result of a careful process of review and public input. School policies should not be passed on a schedule that's dictated by popular news items or political protests. The recent racial violence is a terrible concern and has sparked discussions in my family about the need for fairness in dealing with people of all races. It should not be used as justification for shortcutting the policy development process. The draft non-discrimination resolution proposed has numerous fundamental problems as written. It's written in a legalese which is unlike any of our other school policies. What are the implications of such language? Has it been reviewed by council? Has a public outreach been conducted? At this point, I'm requesting that the board set this matter aside for now until we have a handle on the immediate crisis at hand. And this particular item can be addressed later in the year when school is in session and the public is fully engaged. That's all I have for now.
Okay. Just a clarification, if I might. The resolution is not a policy. And don't ask me to explain the difference because I will tell you I don't know. And with the advisement of the board, I would like to charge the superintendent to seek legal counsel for the board to understand the differences and that he can come back to the board and advise us on those differences. Policies are different, that's all I can tell you, but I don't know the legal impacts of what a resolution is. So I stand before you ignorant in at this point, but we're going to get some advice from legal counsel on that.
Will there be another opportunity to speak on this matter as this goes through? Because I have more detailed comments about
I'm going to
language.
seek approval from the board to put this into what we call first reading. It's common what we do. So we're using a process that we use for policy, and we're using it for a resolution. But please don't make the assumption that therefore then it's a policy. It's not a policy until we say it's a policy. So we're using the process of reviewing, modifying if necessary, and adopting through what we call readings. Typically, it's 3 readings. The board does not have to go through the full 3 readings. We might get to second reading and say, this is right where we need it. And also based on other input, maybe we'll get from the community, and then move to adopt at the second reading, or there may be things that we need to continue, or maybe additional input that we received that would justify a third reading. So that's the process. And that's specifically why I'm putting that idea forward, because I want to give time. We're battling reopening. This is a huge thing we're dealing with. We've never dealt with it before. But we want to give the time this other resolution needs to be able to really look at it and address it. So that's the proposal. I don't know if it's going to be accepted by the board, but that's what I'm going to seek right after public input.
Yeah, I would greatly support that, and I guess my understanding is each reading is an opportunity to speak about the revisions that have occurred prior. Yeah, I very much support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tiffany Testo, 101 Moore Hill Road. This is hard. Wow, this is really hard, and I need to turn around and look at my community too, because I feel pretty vulnerable. I feel pretty vulnerable up here.
You need to just
Okay.
address me.
Okay.
Thank you.
But I just had to turn around and know that's my community. So, you know, we're faced with the fact that actually today is tomorrow, and there is a fierce urgency of now. And I want to maybe change the thinking that this resolution, one, it's the legalese of the wording is because it's a resolution, and resolutions are spoken in that way. It's not a policy at all, nor, so when we talk about first readings and second readings and third readings and voting and all of that, that tends to be the work of policy. And it's hard for me to get to the... So one of the things that I just heard, and that comes to me as a deflection of the important work around equity and education. First off, equity and education are not separate. They are the only thing, right? Like, we are equitable education. So when I hear things of like, this needs to have conversation, all that resolution said was, this needs to have conversation. We need to take action now and move forward, because there is a such thing as being too late. There's a such thing as being too late to this conversation in terms of getting our kids ready to come back. I work in education. I've worked in education for over 20 years. I'm extremely experienced in equitable education and in educational reform. And we are a white community that will build the powerful people that make the decisions that affect our entire nation. And we have to teach our kids about this work. We can't say that race has nothing to do with us, because we don't really have a lot of diversity. We're actually a race. We're a race of white people, and some of you are a race of others. But this is the work of all of us, because race and racism and anti-racism is the work of all of us, not just those that have it in their school district. And we all know from the day-to-day work that it does come across in our school district. And our kids do get the messages, and those conversations are important. So this resolution is about starting that work. It's not about a policy, it's just about starting that work. And I really, really urge the superintendent and administration and this board to support making action that happens before we return back, because they're returning, our students are returning back from crisis, from a pandemic, and from a real clear equitable issues in our nation and social justice. And if we don't do the work to figure out how to support teachers in those conversations and how to support students in those conversations, then we haven't gotten them ready to come back to school. And I feel really strongly about that. The other thing that I think is really important in terms of thinking about this work is that it's all tied in to social and emotional too. And so we don't know the experiences that our kids have, but we have to start getting our curriculum and our work around equity ingrained into our school. That's really important. So I would urge us not to wait. I would urge us not to wait. It's so easy to wait. You know, I've read so many articles on how this gets sidelined. It gets sidelined really, really easy. And I'm asking you to be careful, to not let it be sidelined. This isn't another issue. This is about going back to school right. And that's about social and emotional learning, and that's about learning around equitable education. So we have done a really good job of hearing all night long about the logistics and the health and the safety. And I want to add to that I have full confidence in this district and around that, but I think we also need to focus on the other things that are important. So, thanks.
Hi, my name is Susan Hamola. I'm at 15 Mendelson. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate that we're having this conversation. I think it's always good, and I think the one thing about our community is that we're not afraid to have these conversations. The one thing that I would actually comment on is the fact that it is my impression that the Hollis Brookline staff is confident, kind, compassionate, have always taught the children to be such. I mean, page 13 of the Student Parent Handbook addresses student behavior and kindness. There's also a new policy on bullying and anti-violence. And I think the school's been very proactive about that. I think the conversations of kindness have always happened. I don't think that that's changed. And I don't think, even given everything that's happening in communities outside of Hollis, that doesn't change the fact that Hollis teachers are going to go back with the same competencies, the same professionalisms, and teaching the students in the same way. When I was 13, my mom moved me from Massachusetts to inner city Phoenix, and I got the impression, I got to have the experience, the great experience actually, of being somebody who didn't look like anybody else in my school. And the one takeaway that I got from that was that it always came down to kindness. It was a very hard experience for me, but it wasn't because I was the only person who looked like me. It was because it was riddled with gang violence and drugs. Not fun. And so it's because of those reasons that I've spent my adult life seeking out school districts that can give my children the life that I actually didn't get to have, and so that they're safe. And I always tell my kids, the best gift that I can have is that you never know what I had to know. I came to Hollis because of the school. I love the kindness of the teachers, and I just feel like you guys have been talking about inclusivity for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like these are things that you're already doing. And I feel like at this point, it somewhat takes away from the business at hand of opening up the school. I'm sorry, I'm looking at everybody, not you.
That's fine.
It takes away from the business of opening up school. But having said that, I think it's a great conversation to have, but to everybody's point, I will say we've already been having it. And I do wonder, I guess my question is to you, is there a reason that we have trusted the competency and the professionalism of our staff? Is there a reason that we can't trust them now? And I am very concerned about bringing in an outside agency, because I actually think that we can have those conversations. If somebody had any issue in our school, the school's student handbook is very clear about the levels of address that they can take, the levels of reaction. They can go up to many levels. It's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's my understanding that on our staff we have mental health professionals that can handle acute issues that might come up. So I would just ask you, is there a reason why the competency and professionalism of our current staff is not adequate to address this?
I think there's just a general feeling that this is given the situation nationally, it's a good conversation to provide some introspection on how are we doing as an organization. I think we do a pretty darn good job.
I agree.
But
I totally agree.
I also want to ask the right questions and say, to double check that, right? I want to double check that. I want to say, hey, we pretty much do, policy is what we do. We're a policy board. There's nothing wrong with looking at our policies, reevaluating them in light of changes, whether it's national or local or whatever reason can trigger a directive down to the policy committee and say, hey, I want the committee to take a look at our policies relating to whatever and come back with a recommendation. This is a good time to take a look and see what we're doing, how are we doing, instead of saying we're doing great. Let's see how well we're doing.
And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think the concern that some people have, though, is that some of these outside organizations, maybe not everybody trusts their
Yeah.
motives.
So
And
the only
we'll
thing I would
just be honest
advise
about that.
is the draft calls that out. I'm not sure the final product would have that in it. I'm not sure. I don't know where the readings would take it. And certainly the input we receive, right?
Right.
The draft is really a starting point. And I would like to remind everybody that, and there was some comments made that it's easy to wait. It's not easy to wait. We sometimes feel the urgency of folks in the community. We understand their need to put something in writing and establish something. But we also need to understand this is the first time this board has seen this resolution.
Sure.
And people will say, not true, you saw it at the governing board. We are not called to order as a Hollis School Board. Now, I know this is kind of technical and whatever, and you could roll your eyes, but we're
I'm
not
rolling my
doing,
eyes.
no, not you specifically.
Oh.
I'm general.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that as a district, we can't do any district business at a governing board. We're doing the business of the SAU office.
Sure.
But we use that opportunity to socialize what's coming. If that didn't happen, literally, this would be the first time we saw this resolution.
Sure.
And I need folks to keep that in mind, because we haven't really delved into the details on this either.
Sure. Well,
No.
my only one request is sometimes this stuff keeps us marching down the line, and
No.
parents are somewhat involved and not involved. But my only request is if an outside agency is brought in to look at policy, that parents actually get the chance to vet that
Sure.
outside agency, and that is part of the vote. Because
Yep.
if it's us just giving you permission to go find any agency you want, I think that's actually the most critical factor.
I think that's great input.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Pam Hicks, 8 Maple Knoll Drive. I'm sorry. Pam Hicks, 8 Maple Knoll Drive. Sorry. I'm not going to say this very well, but I do feel very strongly that this is not the time to look at this. We have a country that's torn apart. We have kids that are fighting through social media, and it is pitting our kids against one another. We have a discrimination policy. If it's not working well, then it needs to be looked at and changed appropriately.
Mhm.
But, this district has done a great job. Sorry. This district has done a great job with inclusion and acceptance. And if you want to develop a policy like this, I think it should be something done internally, a lower key, but not now. Everyone is in such upheaval. We've got COVID going on, and we do have and I hate to say this, but we do have a predominantly white population here. And that resolution is basically saying that if you are, let's see here, it defines anything you do as unjust, the unjust outcome, you're a racist. And our kids don't need to hear this. My daughter said the other day, and she's going to kill me for mentioning her, she said to me, she says, you know what, Mom? She said, I never used to see color, ever. She said, but because of all of what's going on, I'm seeing it now, and she doesn't like it, and I feel the same way. This is being shoved down our throats. It's a political agenda, and this is not the time to do this. If anything else, I would urge this district to go back and look at our curriculum and look at the history that is being taught, so that the full scope of history is being taught to all of our kids, so that everyone can make informed decisions, with all of the facts. But this is going to rip our kids apart. And I feel like you guys as leaders, you have an opportunity to speak up and condemn all forms of hatred and you know, all of this. But I really do, I feel like it's sending the wrong message to our kids. These are adult fights, and we're putting it on our kids, and you're making our kids fight. And I think instead of finding ways to redefine racism, find ways of tolerance and getting along, instead of you deserve this because you're that color and you deserve this because you're this color. That's the stuff that's got to stop. And you all, by this resolution, are encouraging that to further divide our community and in fact the whole country. And I hope it stops somewhere.
Okay, thank you. I would like to recognize anyone who's in line. So if you do feel that you have additional public input, just kind of make your way within 6 feet of one another so I can see what we're dealing with, because I would like to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
Superintendent Corey, I'm Andrew Scott, Proctor Hill Road. Superintendent Corey, Chairman Mann, members of the board. The Hollis Brookline Non-Discrimination and Equity Initiative states that SAU 41 will make anti-racism and equity a strategic priority and denounce all forms of institutionalized racism by supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. To implement this process, the proposal states that SAU 41 will render services from an outside consultant who will evaluate and advise the district and make recommendations to draft new or edit existing policies and update curriculum, etc. I have several points. Point number one, I do not support using taxpayer money to bring in outside consultants. The voters in this community just gave our teachers and administration significant financial raises because we have confidence that you can do your job and do it well, and you have done that. You've shown us that over the years. You know our community and members of our community. You know our parents and you know our kids. This is already happening organically. My daughter's a rising college senior who graduated from HB. She told me last night that she's Facebook friends with a number of former teachers and talking online about how they're adjusting their courses to address many of the issues of the day. For example, the U.S. Literature curriculum teacher asked for community recommendations on BIPOC and LGBTQ literature to update curriculum. In addition, the official HBHS library account has been posting, quote, in an attempt to refocus my history lens and fill some knowledge and understanding gaps, I joined other librarians dedicated to challenging our existing ideas and understanding on racism, sexism, ageism, equality, and being a better human. I've realized some tough to acknowledge stuff from some easy to embrace people. So much respect for my colleagues across the country. We've got stuff to learn each day in every way, and that's okay. My point is we don't need outside consultants. Our teachers are doing their jobs and do not need to be told what to teach or how to teach from outside consultants. I do appreciate other commenters have mentioned, and you, Chairman Mann, has said that you're looking to make this a process. I very much appreciate that because I do think that the input from the community is very important. My second point is the proposal uses the word racism or anti-racism 5 times, inclusion 5 times, equity or equitable 8 times. There was a time when all of us had pretty much a good idea what those terms meant. For example, if you ask most Americans today, what does it mean to be anti-racist? They would probably say something akin to the ideal espoused by Martin Luther King, that we are to be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Anti-racist used to mean to be against people, to be against people who judge by race. That is not the definition in our culture today. In our culture, social justice via critical race theory is driving the cultural narrative. Critical race theory has very specific meanings to these words, which are not the same as what you might currently think. So before voting on this initiative, I'm asking the board to please see how these words are defined in our current cultural narrative and the implications behind those definitions. A website that aims to be non-political while using primary sources, that's important, primary sources from leading critical race theorists and organizations to accurately define what they mean by these terms and then comment on those definitions can be found at a website called www.newdiscourses.com. Click on the Social Justice Encyclopedia and look up some of those keywords. I'm perfectly willing to do that work for you and send the content. I think it's very valuable. It's opened my eyes to a lot of things that I did not understand. And so I will pass that on. I do think that that should be a part of this process. If we are going to pass this resolution or a policy ultimately, I think that defining those words is a very important part of the process. And then point number 3 states that, my point number 3 is that the proposal states that educational equity is the intentional allocation of resources, instruction, and opportunities according to need, requiring that discriminatory practices, prejudices, and beliefs be identified and eradicated. So this proposal states that we are going to identify and eradicate discriminatory practices. We all agree to that. That is the law of our land. A practice is something that is a thing created by human beings. A practice or a policy is a thing created by human beings that we can identify and indeed eradicate. But prejudices and beliefs are not things created by human beings. They are things held. Beliefs are held by human beings. Are we saying that as a district, we're going to identify prejudices and beliefs and then eradicate children who hold those beliefs? You know, how do you eradicate a belief in a child once it's identified? You know, are we going to shame them, like cancel culture, isolate them? That word really needs to be defined. And I was a little bit surprised that that was actually a quote from the National School Board Association, directly from them. So again, words have meaning, and it's important to define those words. Right? So there was a time when I would assume the writer of the proposal simply poorly worded a sentence, but given our current cultural discourse, I just don't know that, and so I do want that to be a part of the discussion. In summary, I do not believe that we need outside consultants. Any outside consultant will be well-versed in social justice and critical race theory, so before voting on a proposal like this, please research, I'm asking the board to please research what these terms mean within the context of critical race theory, because if it does get passed, eventually that is how it's going to be understood. I'm not worried about you, Tammy. I'm not worried about Chairman Mann or Andy. I'm not concerned about any of you, right? I know you four in particular, but 10 years from now, when my little ones are in high school, you guys probably aren't going to be here, right? And so who's going to be here, and what are they going to be defining? I really want those terms defined and defined very well. And adjusting that final comment that I talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to recognize that there's 2 individuals left for public input standing. So I'm not asking, please don't add to the line. We're calling it done after 2 more.
Rob, prior to our next public speaker, excuse me, Mr. Ledoux, can I ask a quick clarification question from our last person?
Yes.
A couple of folks have asked about the consultant, and I just want to, if you could, if you're going to make commentary on it, clarify if you're talking about a paid consultant, or are you talking about looking to outside sources, like the example that Mr. Corey gave, where he's speaking with other organizations that are providing information or guidance that is not paid? If you could just clarify that. I want us to all be very clear what the public is looking for out of that consultative portion, since it is in question at this point.
So I think both and, primarily the paid consultants from outside the community. I think that most of those paid consultants that would come into our community have no idea what our community is about. I've heard horror stories from business people that have hired these types of trainers to come in, and it's not a positive process. I didn't have time to talk about this, but in 2016, the Washington Post wrote about the Harvard Business Review that talked about how the authors point to a range of past social science studies that have shown that efforts to reduce prejudice can backfire, actually increasing bias or leading to more hostility rather than less. So that's my concern, is that most of those organizations will be very strong and using the definitions of, from critical justice theory. If that's what we want as a community, then that's what we want as a community, but only after really understanding what it is that we're voting in, right? So even the term, you know, implicit bias or systemic racism, right? Those have meanings. I mean, when I first started hearing those, you know, over the last few years, I was just thinking about, okay, yeah, I have read the studies where, you know, resumes can be sent in, exact same resumes. One has a black sounding name, one has a traditionally, you know, white sounding name, and there is a difference in hiring. I've read those. I don't mind our students learning about these things. What I don't know is how in 1960 the result, how has it improved, right? I see that there is still racism there. How has it improved? So the systemic part to me was, okay, how can we fix these things? How can we improve them? How can we get better? How can we reach Martin Luther King's dream of, you know, being a nation that doesn't look at skin color, but looks at the content of someone's character. You know, another speaker talked about the kindness of our staff. It's an amazing staff, and I totally agree with that. But that's not what that word means to those who are steeped in critical justice, critical theory, critical race theory. That's not what that means. Systemic means it is rotten at the core. Like it can't be fixed. It has to be taken down and built again. It's easy to tear things down. It is not so easy to build back up. And that's a discussion that I want us to have. I don't mind having these tough discussions, but those words have meaning. And we have to be very careful about inserting those words and allowing people to say, this is what you need to teach your kids, because I don't think those things are true. I think the promise and the principles behind this country, you know, imperfect as they may have been in its founding, imperfect as they've been practiced over the years, we have been on an arc getting better and better and better. And how awful would it be to teach our kids that we have an awful, awful country, right? And in some parts of the country, that is happening right now. I've traveled all around the world. I've been in many countries, from Malaysia to the Middle East to Kenya to you know, Central America and South America. And every time I come back, I thank God that I live in this country. It's an amazing country.
I need to just jump in here. Did you get your clarification to your question?
I did, and I was just about to thank you. Thanks so much for coming
Okay,
back up. No,
thank
that
you.
was good. Thank you so much. All right, Mark, you can come now.
My name is Mark Ledoux. I'm a selectman here in town. I live at 64 Dow Road. First of all, I just want to congratulate you all for dealing with very difficult topics. I want to congratulate the educators. I want to congratulate the citizen servants who make up the board for hearing the concerns of the community, hearing the concerns of the educators, and understanding that your role is really to educate the next generation of leaders in our community. A lot of things have been talked about tonight as it relates to this issue of equity and fairness and all those things. As the chairman of the select board, I have to weigh a lot of things that fall into a very gray area of consideration. And then we have to seek consensus. Just as the framers of the Constitution of the United States had to do this, just as the framers of the Bill of Rights here in New Hampshire. And I generally find it most instructive when you're struggling with something that's temporal, that's timely, that needs the filter of a lens of history that is not modified by the current state of affairs. It is what it is. The words are what they are. The meanings may be nuanced, but I want to just read for you all and enter in the record as you struggle with this, as the community struggles with this. Something was written many, many years ago, and I'm going to insert the term women behind the word men, because when this document was written, women were not considered of equal voting value as men. So allow me to read. All men and women are born equally free and independent. Therefore, all government of right originates from the people is founded in consent and instituted for the general good. All men and women have certain natural, essential, and inherent rights, among which are the enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and in a word, seeking and obtaining happiness. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by this state on account of race, creed, color, sex, or national origin. This was adopted on June 2nd, 1784, during the adoption of the Bill of Rights to the New Hampshire Constitution. And I think that gives you a really good guiding set of principles as you struggle with these issues, which are very nuanced and very time sensitive. And they're driven by the events of today in the media, as well as our own consciences, who have seen the anguish and the angst that people have endured at the hands of injustice, and you want to reach out and grab somebody by the scruff of the neck and say, what were you thinking? But that is not our charter here. Our charter is to bring equity, intelligence, wisdom, and compassion to this discussion. You have a very good set of policies. I've read them. We in the town have a very good set of policies dealing with issues of discrimination, concerns about equity, concerns about sex issues, whatever it is that's of the day, we've already addressed those. I won't leave here without pointing out something that brought a great joy to my heart to read. In this room, over there behind Carol, choose to be respectful, choose to be responsible, choose to be kind. I admonish you one more. Choose to be wise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Warner. I'm last. I'll talk quick. I just appreciate you letting me talk. This is very upsetting to me, and I'm a bit bewildered. I moved here 3 years ago. I don't have any children in this school, but I got introduced to this wonderful place when I got my first property tax bill, and I decided that if I was going to turn over that much money to an institution, that I should find out about it. And I did. And you all came out top of the food chain, in my opinion. I found so many glowing things, so many studies. I thought, awesome. I'm in a place where great school is, because there's nothing more important than educating the kids. So I'm really bewildered when I see this resolution and this issue, because when I was in my professional life, I was a trial attorney in California. And one of the main lawsuits that I would bring are on behalf of people who identified as black or brown, Asian, who claimed racism. Institutional racism seems to be a popular phrase. And I would, forgive me, sue school boards on behalf of kids who were mistreated. I sued governments, city governments. And the reason I bring that up is this. Racism is evil. It's a sin. It needs to be stomped out. There's no dispute in my mind about that, and it's an urgent issue. But I constantly heard this, well, let's hire an expert. You know, I had many a case where I would sue a school board who had experts, and that was their defense. We hired this guy or this girl to come in, and we listened to him after he charged us several $1 million to do our study. And you know what? I got multi-million-dollar verdicts against that school board, because in the final analysis, I convinced the jury that to hire an expert, an outsider, was to take their responsibility and transfer it to somebody else, and then use that as an excuse for not doing their own job. You cannot turn over this issue to somebody who doesn't know this school, doesn't know your kids, doesn't know this fine young lady that talked up here, doesn't know her needs or wants. It's a way of saying, oh, I'm taking care of the problem. I've transferred that issue from my shoulders to somebody else. Who is this other person? Why would you want to bring their values into this scenario? What's wrong with you saying, I'm going to take charge? I'm going to go after this issue because I have the talent, I have the ability, and most importantly, I love these kids. You tell me what expert out there can stand there and say, I love these kids, I want to do the right thing. Those people are right here. So I ask you, this is an urgent issue. It's very urgent, and you can't wait 3 years while an expert charges you a couple of $1 million to tell you what the facts of life are. It's now. Isabel, did I get the name right? Isabel needs to know that right now.
Isabel.
I'm sorry?
Isabel.
Thank you. I've been meaning to mispronounce it. She needs to know that action is being taken right now on her behalf. And how do you do that? When I would put on my case, the people that I would call is the mom, the dad, the kid, the neighbors, the friends, the relatives, because they know what's going on. Place to start is with the people that are standing up saying, I feel like I'm not welcome here. This town, everybody I've met here is so welcoming, so loving, so caring. Why is there somebody in our midst who says, I don't feel welcome? Why not just go ask them? Why hire an expert to stand between you and that student? I ask you to consider it urgent. I ask you to take responsibility, not pass it off on somebody that doesn't care about your kids, that only cares about doing the tap dance they do as an expert. Don't ask them to come in here and do your job and impose their values on your kids. And I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to close public input on this particular and open it up for any
Hey,
comments.
Mr. Warner, feel like volunteering?
I'd love to volunteer.
Talk
There
to
it
that
is.
guy.
Everybody in this town thinks I'm a pest because I keep saying I'm going to help. And I'd love to help. Thank you for asking.
We could use substitutes.
You are on the record, sir.
Bob, we need
So,
So may I, are you
yeah,
taking?
please,
So
briefly,
to your to your excellent point, especially if you are the expert you claim you are, feel free to sit down.
I've got witnesses.
As Hamilton says, my
My wife.
clients were acquitted. So I think it is important to make an important distinction, not to refute what you said and what others said on your point, but to get in the crevice between the black and the white thinking, nothing to do with race. I mean, just this or that, A or B. And that is, for example, everyone in here knows how to do math. Most of us know how to balance a checkbook, etc. I trust people at the SAU to do all the bookkeeping exactly right, to do the accounting exactly right. The budget committee is constantly down our throats to get it right, but we still have an outside auditor. And when the outside auditor checks on us, they find mistakes we have to fix. We've had an outside auditor, not on the money side, but on a citizen didn't like a decision the SAU governing board made having to do with, I forgot what, and so we had to go to an attorney, an outside auditor of our practice in order to determine if our practice had been legal and was legal going forward procedurally. Turned out it was legal and it was legal going forward, and we changed it anyway. So when you ask us, can't we just ask the families that are complaining about being left out, et cetera, you're 100,000% right. But in a 92% white state, and maybe even a higher white town, I don't even know the percentages.
94%.
Okay, 94%, assuming that's accurate today. We don't have the internal knowledge to know if our best effort is you don't know what you don't know. So I'm not actually arguing in favor of this resolution as written, but the point's been made by so many people. And I feel it's important to point out that none of us, even you, can walk in the shoes of a person of color who sees reflexively assumed material in the curriculum, a reflexive use of certain language or certain presumptions, like somebody else mentioned, I'm sorry, I get it, maybe it was Andrew. you know, the two resumes sitting side by side and depends on the sound of the name as to which one gets picked, those kind of things. We can't see those things. We don't hear them. We're not in that, literally that skin. And there is a role for someone who doesn't look like us and hasn't lived our life informing us. But if that's all we ever did, of course, you're 100,000% right. That would be an absolute moral failure.
So Tammy, I'd like to leave it there. I think that's a great segue to our next conversation and our next meeting. Let's keep that in mind.
Your comment's been documented.
I appreciate that, but I don't get to.
No. Public input's closed.
I think
She made you stand up for nothing.
But we'd love you to come back when we reopen this item at another board meeting, and by all means, come up to our mic. But I have to move on.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
She just said something. I wanted to respond. I really thank you very much. This is a wonderful procedure. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We have to move on to, there's an item under deliberations to see what actions the board will take regarding authorizing the board chair.
Rob,
No board input?
no
I'm sorry?
board input?
Okay, yeah. So we didn't really talk, but
Right.
we need to, yeah, so the only other thing is I'd like to put this into first reading and get this going. I know the action isn't in our.
I'd like to hear from the lawyer first.
Correct, I agree, about the resolution versus policy and how we need to proceed and the implications thereof.
Because I
Before we
don't,
even take that action, so no action tonight.
I'm not
Okay.
necessarily saying that. I'm just saying in terms of treating it as a policy reading, I would wait to hear
Okay,
the
let's do
different.
that. Let's get more advisement legally. So any other comment or concern?
On the
on this
procedure?
issue?
On the procedure or the initiative?
On the resolution itself.
Brooke, did you want to?
No, go ahead. I got to find stuff.
When we first read this, I happened to be in attendance at the SAU governing board and knew about this in advance of that as well. The outside consultant portion needs to be more specific, because if we are talking about a paid opportunity or not, our district has an incredible track record of having subject matter experts from our community, subject matter experts that are within the superintendent community that Andy Corey is incredibly, involved in. He's already been talking about referencing those folks for this. I hesitate to put dollars behind any of this when we really, I agree with the members of the public who are saying, why would we pluck somebody from totally outside of our fairly unique community and ask them to exact that kind to it. I think we need to exhaust the free yet vast pool of SMEs that exist in our community and in Brookline, and through that, the connections that our superintendent staff have before we go into any of that. So I think that I couldn't accept this as written into a first reading at all, because I think there are a lot of clarifying things that need to happen.
Fair enough.
Along with, one of our members of the public was talking about definitions. Absolutely needs a glossary of definitions, because we need to know what they stand for. So if it stands for this right now, and as he mentioned, 10 years down the road, even 5 years down the road, new group of people in here, they're going to define things differently, or they can look at it and say, okay, 5 years ago, race equity meant this. That's not what it means to us anymore. That's when it can go back for a policy review and rewrite. I want to also just point out, final point, it mentions in the third, therefore, the last line, draft new or edit existing policies and procedures. We need to look at that. If we can edit the existing policy and procedure to truly capture this and make this a good idea and make it something that we're involving our teachers in doing and entrusting them to do what they do, I do agree with that. We have a stellar teaching staff in this entire SAU. I think that would be optimal.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Any other members?
I guess I want to say that I was involved with the drafting of this resolution, and it is, I'm better at listening than I am at speaking. So this came about through a lot of listening during my time in our community. It is not a response to national events. It is through careful listening to the needs of members of our community. And it's being drafted in a critical time in history for all of our students that live today. They will all be better citizens of our future world when we focus on embedding equity and conversations, informed conversations about race into our schools. A lot of what I heard tonight reiterated that for me. So I hope that we can evolve this to something that the board can get behind and that the public can get behind, because it makes all of us better when we embrace equity and justice for race and all differences within our community. So
Hear, hear,
that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move on if we can. Thank you. Other members? Okay. So no action. We're moving this to other business, new business for another night. I would like to get straight to our deliberations to see what action the board will take regarding authorizing the board chair to sign the federal general assurances.
This is a yearly form that comes to us, and basically it's just saying that the board is aware that we receive federal money, and to receive that federal money, Bob, Gina, and I must comply with the requirements. Those requirements are reviewed through our own business office and then through the auditor's office. And this came about 3 or 4 years ago because some districts, I guess, weren't aware that they were getting federal dollars, nor were they aware of the stipulations that went with those federal dollars. So they felt that by having us sit at a meeting and tell the board about the dollars, so this would be Title I, Title II, and Title IV, as well as the IDEA. IDEA is your special education funds. Your Title IV focuses on your technology funds from the federal government. Title I, we do not take. It actually is more work and not cost effective in the least for us. And Title II is used for teacher professional development. So it's a form that Rob has been signing for the last 3 or 4 years. And if you vote tonight, he'll stop by the SAU and sign it again.
It is the single most brilliant way I have found to help with insomnia.
Oh, it's
Oh
painful.
my God.
When does this need signature?
I don't think even this Mr. Warner could have gotten through
End of the
it.
month.
End of July, it needs signature?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
I move to accept the, how are we supposed to say this? I've lost my.
It's in your outline.
I move to authorize the board chair to
Authorize the
sign the
board.
federal general assurances.
I move to authorize the board chairperson to represent the school board and acknowledge that the superintendent has consulted with all members of the school board in furtherance of the school board's obligations, including those enumerated in RSA 189:1-A, and pursuant to the school board's oversight of federal funds the district will be receiving, and of the general assurances, requirements, and definitions for participation in said federal programs.
I second.
Discussion.
Make us proud, board chair.
We are grateful for the funding.
Seeing
that
none,
supports our
and
students.
I'm not calling for a roll call. All in favor? Unanimous. Any other, we got non-public?
We have a non-public.
But no other business right now before we call for a motion for that? I would just like to say, I know we went really long. I know you guys have a lot of other stuff to do to prepare for tomorrow. We handled 2 gigantic topics tonight, and I really appreciate your flexibility. And with that, I will take a
Great
motion.
public input, by the way, too.
It was
Very happy
phenomenal
about that.
public
It was
input.
nice to see everybody here. We weren't sure how many
Phenomenal
chairs would be
public
full.
input, And I really would like everyone to, the members, to kind of reflect on that input and use it for really good discussions next time we meet.
I move that the board go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, 2A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, and C, to discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself.
Second.
You'll be next.
Holly?
I know, I watched you very carefully.
By roll call, because that's required for this motion.
Who seconded it?
No-
Who did the second?
Brooke,
I
aye.
seconded, and Carol, I.
Amy, I.
Tammy, aye.
Rob, aye. We are now in non-public.